Hello everyone, it's Shane Canto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review, and just like that, this new series, sequel series to Sex and the City, which I'll admit I have never watched. So this was an interesting watch, hopping into this series and seeing all these characters years later after the original series ended, and, you know, no Samantha, Kim Cattrall, but, she's just in Paris, and they haven't talked in a while. But that's okay. It'll be interesting to see if this series continues and to see if she comes back. But you have here in this season, you have Carrie, Miranda, and Charlotte coming back. You have Carrie, and she's happily married to Big. They're in love. They have a good marriage. They have a good thing going. And then, of course, for this show is just like HBO Max is like flipping fans the bird apparently, and Chris Noth, Big, dies at the beginning of the series after riding a Peloton, which then Peloton released this ad with Chris Noth in it, which was like the complete opposite of what happened in the show. And then Chris Noth got in a bunch of trouble and they pulled that ad. So what a wonderful roller coaster ride. But you have Big passing away, and a lot of the season is about Carrie really finding herself again and trying to move on. And there's definitely some characters that are like sprinkled in throughout that obviously from the original series I wouldn't know, but shows and movies kind of like point out characters like that and make a big deal about them from the filmmaking perspective, and like I could pick up hints. And you have Carrie who's trying to sell her apartment, and she develops a really fun relationship with Seema, played by Sarita Choudhury. I enjoy their dynamic, their budding friendship, and the different kinds of perspectives that it brings up between the two of them, and they're a lot of fun together. I enjoy them. And then you see Carrie, as the season goes on, making some stronger connections, maybe with some other men, and you see her going on to this podcast and being able to talk about like sex life and stuff like that with her host Che. And I think Carrie's arc in this is probably the most significant and the most emotionally resonant, and the one that we could connect with the most, because then you do have Cynthia Nixon back as Miranda, who is bored and just not happy about being stuck in the life she has with her husband Steve, and she starts falling for Che, the non-binary host that Carrie does her show with, and they have this budding relationship, and like the shitstorm of people angry about what they did to Steve in this show, which I don't have that strong emotional connection, but like I think it's an interesting thing to be targeting this kind of feeling of like later in life realizing maybe this isn't all that's enough for you, and exploring kinds of things. And like, is the character Steve getting the short end of the stick of it? It's like, yeah, but no, like this kind of stuff happens. I know a lot of people are like, you're being unbelievably mean to this character, and it's just like, life happens honestly, and people fall out of love, fall out of connection, and you have Miranda also going back to school and making this connection with her professor, who has her own baggage at home, which I appreciate, like their dynamic and the story elements that come up from that, helping Miranda realize like she has a lot to learn in terms of like equity and inclusion and stuff like that, which I feel like that's hit on with all these characters, because like they're middle-aged white women, and in a new world, like being able to make others feel comfortable and connecting with. And then you have Kirsten Davis, who is Charlotte, who by far I think was least interesting to me. A lot of her storylines felt like first world problems, like on steroids, and like they do have some interesting ideas of like her child coming out as trans more or less, and like trying to have that connection and get an understanding, because Charlotte seems a little ignorant and a little dense with a lot of things, and like obviously I don't have those connections with these characters, but it's kind of the vibe that I was getting, and I think it made her definitely the least interesting of the main three, and her storylines I felt like were the least interesting, and she kind of got on my nerves. But I think they do have some interesting ideas, but they're not necessarily just about her. And then, like, you have Stanford and Anthony who come back here, and unfortunately the actor who played Stanford, like, passed away, so, like, he's only in a limited amount of episodes. But Anthony's a lot of fun. He is a great comic relief character in here, and there's a lot of fine other characters who pop in and out of this season, and it deals with a lot of themes of, like, aging and sexuality and, you know, racism and prejudice and implicit biases, because there's a lot of implicit biases throughout the show as these three middle-aged white women are trying to process how they can be more welcoming and make those connections with their non-white peers and friends. And I feel like the show deals with a lot of that kind of stuff, and I felt like it was interesting enough. Like, I thought it was a fine watch. It's not something that I was, like, dying to watch every Thursday. But, you know, I thought it was a fine sequel series to this original show that I have no actual connection with. And I feel like, you know, some of the characters had better arcs than others. Some of them were more interesting. Some of them had more depth. But I feel like if you really hone in on Carrie in this season, like, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot that you can relate to, and a lot getting up to the point of, like, her being okay with moving on to somebody else. And I appreciated that in this series a lot. So kudos to Sarah Jessica Parker for really carrying that role. But those are my thoughts on And Just Like That. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some TV. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.